Some places separate life and death with nothing more than a single door. On May 2nd, 2011, in Kaili, Guizhou, inside the maternity ward of a provincial hospital, a place meant to welcome new life. Mothers, newborns, the steady roll of medical carts along the hallway. Everything felt normal, until around 4 in the afternoon. Suddenly, screams tore through one hospital room. Not an argument, a cry for help. A 42-year-old high-risk postpartum woman, just 3 days after giving birth, was stabbed again and again in her hospital bed. Her head was taken away, and the person holding the knife was not a stranger. It was her husband. This was not an accident. This was a case where the truth was permanently silenced by a bullet. Welcome to Red Eastern True Crime. If you want to see more crime stories, please like and subscribe. Let's dive into this story. The wife's name was Qiujing. She was 42 years old. 3 days earlier, she had given birth to her first child, a baby boy. The child was healthy. Yang was not yet fully recovered and was advised to remain in the hospital for observation. On the afternoon of May 2nd, 2011, Yang lay on her bed in the maternity ward. The room was quiet. An elderly couple, her relatives, had come to visit. They brought chicken soup to help her regain strength. Yang lay on her side, slowly sipping the soup, speaking to them in low voices. Nothing in the room suggested what was about to happen. At that moment, her husband Jiulie walked into the room. One of the relatives was just about to greet him. Without warning, Long reached into his clothing, pulled out a kitchen knife, and swung it toward Yang's neck. When the blade came down, Yang didn't even have time to sit up from the bed. The elderly couple froze. The old man reacted on instinct, stepping forward and trying to wrestle the knife away. But a man in his 70s stood no chance. He failed to disarm Long and was slashed repeatedly, collapsing onto the floor with severe injuries. His wife was also struck and wounded. In seconds, the hospital room was no longer a place of recovery. Other patients in the ward fled in panic. Screams tore through the hallway. Murder! Murder! At around 4 p.m., hospital staff called the police. At the same time, the hospital began evacuating the entire floor of pregnant and postpartum women. Hospital security rushed to the room, but did not dare to approach. Long was still swinging the knife wildly, completely out of control. When police arrived, they were confronted with a scene of total devastation. Blood covered the walls and the floor. The bed sheets were soaked through. Yang's body lay beside the bed. Her head was completely separated from her body. Seeing the police, the killer did not retreat. He still clutched the knife, refusing to let anyone come near. Officers attempted to persuade him to put down the weapon from outside the room. The negotiations failed. Seizing a brief opening, several officers pushed multiple medical carts into the room, forcing the rampaging man into a corner. But he broke free almost immediately. In one hand, he held the knife. In the other, he carried his wife's severed head. He paced back and forth inside the room. At that point, the situation was no longer a crime scene. It was a standoff. Police continued to urge him to surrender. He did not respond. Instead, he opened the hospital window and began shouting incoherently at the officers outside. When police attempted to move closer, his agitation escalated. He refused to disarm. Still gripping the knife, he climbed onto the window ledge. Outside the building, officers urgently deployed inflatable safety cushions, preparing for the possibility that he might jump. The standoff dragged on for more than an hour. Standing on the windowsill, the man screamed uncontrollably. No matter how long police pleaded, he would not drop the knife. If anyone stepped closer, he swung the blade toward them. At 6:06 p.m., after repeated failed negotiations and continued armed resistance, police opened fire. Jiulie was killed on the spot. That single gunshot stopped a massacre that could have claimed even more lives. And at the same time, it permanently closed the door to the question of why he killed. Long Jiulie was born in 1963 in a poor farming family deep in the mountains of Guizhou. He was 48 years old at the time of the crime. There were 4 siblings in his family, and he was the eldest. With little education, he began working at a young age. In the memories of villagers, Long was often described as honest, hardworking, and quiet. A man who kept his head down and said little. But in the eyes of many locals, he also seemed to carry something darker, something they struggled to name. Before Yang, Long had been married twice. His first wife died of illness not long after their marriage. Later, after being introduced by a matchmaker, he married a second wife, who eventually hanged herself. 2 abnormal deaths, one after another, gave rise to endless rumors. Some villagers said Long was fated to kill his wives. Others believed he was secretly violent, that what people saw on the surface was not the whole truth. Over time, Long became marked. He was known in the village as a man no one wanted to marry into, a permanent bachelor, unable to find another wife even into his 40s. In a small village, reputations do not fade. They harden. Just when Long believed he would remain alone for the rest of his life, Yang Qiujing appeared. Yang was 6 years younger than Long. She was outspoken and strong-willed, and in her younger years, she was known in nearby villages for her beauty. She had also gone through a failed marriage. In 2009, fate drew together 2 people who were both searching for stability. At the time, the matchmaker spoke highly of Long. Despite his past marriages, he was described as honest, hardworking, and financially stable. Yang was tempted. The 2 met. Long was not handsome, but his quiet sincerity left an impression. Before long, they became a couple. When Yang's parents learned that Long's 2 previous wives had both died, they reacted strongly. They opposed the marriage outright. Years later, Yang's father recalled what he told his daughter. "You cannot marry him. He will kill you too. You will end up lying beside his first 2 wives." In that moment, the warning was clear, but warnings do not always change decisions. Blinded by love and persuasion, Yang dismissed her father's warning as superstition. She married Long, determined to prove her choice was right, unaware that this step had already placed 1 foot inside the gates of death. Married life was nothing like Yang had imagined. Long's home was nearly empty, just a rundown courtyard in the mountains. It bore no resemblance to the well-off household the matchmaker had promised. Yang realized she had been deceived. Outspoken and hot-tempered by nature, she began to scold and criticize Long, more and more frequently. At first, Long tried hard to hold the marriage together. He cooked, he cleaned, he farmed the land and took odd jobs wherever he could find them. He handed all of his earnings to Yang. For a time, he looked like a model husband. But as the pressure built, something darker began to surface. When pushed too far, Long no longer stayed silent. He fought back, especially after drinking. Alcohol changed him. The quiet man villagers remembered would disappear, replaced by someone violent and unpredictable. At times, he became abusive. During those moments, Yang learned to keep her distance. She knew when not to speak. She knew when not to get close. Villagers later said that Long usually appeared mild-mannered, but alcohol changed him. Once he started drinking, the man people knew seemed to disappear, replaced by someone violent and unpredictable. Even more frightening was his chronic illness. Long suffered from severe headaches. When the attacks came, he would lose control and fall into paranoid delusions. On one occasion, while traveling by train with villagers for work, Long suddenly clutched his head and began screaming, "Someone is trying to kill me." Moments later, he jumped from the moving train. To those around him, it was terrifying. To Yang, it was a warning she could not escape. A man in such an unstable mental state was like a ticking time bomb beside her. Pregnancy temporarily disarmed it. At 47, Long finally became a father, and to a son. He was overjoyed. He stopped drinking. He followed Yang's wishes without resistance. In May 2011, Yang gave birth to a baby boy by C-section. Long could not stop smiling. He thanked everyone he met. Behind the joy came crushing financial pressure. To afford the surgery, Long borrowed money from every relative he could reach. Piece by piece, he scraped together 8,000 RMB, about 1,240 US dollars. Then, while staying at the hospital, something went wrong. Long inexplicably lost, or was scammed out of, 4,000 RMB, roughly 620 US dollars. Half of the money meant to keep his wife alive and bring their child safely into the world was suddenly gone. When Yang learned what had happened, her anger erupted. Inside the hospital room, she berated Long relentlessly. She called him useless. She accused him of ruining everything. She threatened divorce. Long snapped back. The argument escalated. Useless. Divorce. No money. These words struck again and again at Long's already fragile and extreme psyche. He left the hospital. He went to the market, bought a kitchen knife, hid it under his clothes, then he returned. Back in the ward, Yang was sipping chicken soup, chatting quietly with visiting relatives. Nothing in the room suggested danger. Long entered without saying a word, and then he attacked. Every blow was deliberate. Every strike was meant to kill. Forensic examination later confirmed that Yang had been stabbed 76 times. At that point, there was no misunderstanding left to resolve, only the aftermath of a decision already made. The massacre sent shockwaves through the entire region. Long Jiulie was shot dead. Yang Qiujing was brutally murdered. Their bodies were taken back to their hometown, and in a decision that stunned many, their families buried them together. In the days that followed, journalists arrived. They spoke with relatives, villagers, and passers-by, trying to piece together meaning from the wreckage. Yang's brother rejected the idea that this tragedy could be explained by a few harsh words. He called Long a madman, a demon. He insisted that no argument could justify such violence. Among villagers, opinions were divided. Some blamed Long's illness, saying his mind had long been unstable. Others pointed to Yang's sharp tongue, suggesting that constant confrontation pushed him over the edge. On the streets, speculation went even further. One passerby questioned whether the child was truly Long's, a rumor that spread quickly, but without evidence. Hospital staff later confirmed that Long had been joyful at the birth of his son. There were smiles. There were thanks. No signs of doubt. Official reports ultimately leaned toward a familiar conclusion: a crime of passion, triggered by long-term family conflict and overwhelming financial pressure. Looking back, if Long's mental illness is set aside, this tragedy appears to have been born from poverty and broken communication. Two people carried poverty, pressure, illness, and long-standing resentment into a maternity ward, a place that should have held only one theme: new life. When the knife fell, more than Yang died. More than Long, a baby, only 3 days old, lost both parents before ever seeing the world clearly. In this case, the person who held the answers is dead. What remains are only fragments, guesses, interpretations, and unfinished explanations. We are left knowing just two things: violence never solves life. It only shatters it further. And when someone repeatedly loses control, repeatedly spirals into violence, waiting for them to get better is not kindness. It is a gamble, placed on the lives of everyone around them. The first to lose is never the loudest voice in the room. It is the weakest, the one with no choice, like a baby, 3 days old. What do you think about this case? Please share your thoughts and opinions in the comments section. Thank you for watching. If you want to see more crime stories, please like and subscribe to my channel.